Following the recent run-up in copper prices, M&A in the sector has surged. Eldorado Gold acquired Foran Mining for $3.8 billion, while Faraday Copper consolidated its Arizona district by acquiring BHP's San Manuel property, as well as securing $100 million from both Lundin Group and BHP. That brings us to NorthIsle Copper and Gold, which has a project located in the north end of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. The project was once a significant mine run by BHP Billiton. NorthIsle is up over 300% in the past year and has a market cap of just under $1 billion. The company is planning to publish an integrated resource update as well as a pre-feasibility study this year. Nicholas Van Dyk is Chief Financial Officer. Nicholas, welcome to Mining Stock Daily.
Thanks, Michael. Happy to be here.
Nicholas, could you talk first about the origin of the NorthIsle project? The project was acquired by your chair, Dale Corman, in 2011. Your chair sadly passed away in April.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, Dale was an important part of our company, a pillar of the industry, and will certainly be missed. He was very proud of everything that our team had done up till today with the company, and we had been talking with him, right up to very recently, and continuing to get his advice and encouragement in what we were doing. Dale acquired the project in 2011. Actually earlier than that, in I think 2008. He then spun it out of Western Copper into its own vehicle in 2011. Our current team was hired by Dale to sort of re-energize the business in 2020. And since then, we've discovered 2 new deposits. We've built a district thesis. We've executed on a very compelling PEA. And we've also done, I think, a pretty good job of showing the world that BC, and in particular Northern Vancouver Island, is a compelling area to develop a mine. Recently, we were selected into the BC Critical Mineral Office as a priority project. And that wasn't just a political thing. That was a meeting that was held at our site office with the leadership of all 3 directly impacted First Nations, BC's Minister of Mines, a number of important community members, and it was really a celebration of where the project's come and the opportunity for the North Island.
Lots of pieces there. Let's just talk about the project and what you're seeing in terms of marching out the resource right now, Nicholas. You had, I believe right now that you're doing infill drilling for Northwest Expo and Red Dog, which is going to be the main focus. And so you're looking at grade continuity there. Just talking about how much confidence you have going into the PFS resource update and also the continuity of grade.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we drilled Northwest Expo and Red Dog late in 2025 and early in 2026 after we had finished the infill drilling at West Goodspeed. We've had a number of press releases about this. So West Goodspeed was announced in late 2025 as having been extended to 1.2 kilometers in strike. It's important to note that this West Goodspeed, I guess it's still a target. It's not yet a deposit because we don't have a resource, but it's intended to be in the integrated resource update later this year. At Northwest Expo, where we do have a resource, we announced the results of the infill drilling there at the end of Q1. The infill drilling demonstrated continuity and confirmation of the grade consistent with the block model within the pit. On the west side of the pit at Northwest Expo, we actually intersected a number of areas where the grade was above that in the block model. And we also extended some of the high grade beyond the current resource pit in that area. So some very exciting results at Northwest Expo. At Red Dog, where we recently finished the infill drilling, we drilled over 5,000 meters of infill in the Red Dog footprint, and the results of that will come out sometime during Q2.
Now, the Goodspeed, I guess, was the discovery, and then you're looking at including that integrated resource. But is that also could be part of continuity, part of a larger system?
Yeah, that's a great question. At West Goodspeed, if you look on our website, we've got a 3D presentation with Verify that shows some of the geological models that we use. That website or that presentation shows that we've got a good connection structurally between Red Dog and West Goodspeed. The team has modeled some interpreted faults that appear to run between those 2 deposits. And there's some clear areas where it would make sense over time to infill Somebody I was talking to earlier today said the term super pit is overused, but there's clearly an opportunity to create a further connection and demonstrate that the mineralization continues in that area.
Now you have a lot of reports that are coming out, Nicholas. I mentioned at the top integrated resources around the pre-feasibility. You did do a PEA, I believe, in early 2025. Just looking at metal prices are a lot different now than they were, I guess, just almost about 2 years ago. Is it worth doing an economic assessment on what the numbers would be for the mine? Also, does that kind of change what you're looking in terms of financing as well as pace of development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the current metal prices suggest a significant opportunity for the project. I would note that in the 2025 report, we included a February 2025 spot case that showed an NPV of as much as $4 billion at 2,900 gold and 450 copper. We're clearly well up from that. We don't need to do a new study to be able to have a conclusion that the project is likely to be better at current metal prices. With that said, it's really important for us to move quickly on developing the project. The communities of the North Island, including the First Nations, have been very supportive, and we're in the midst of a wave of national and provincial support for mining and other industries where we can strengthen our economic independence. So what this means for us is that we're intensely focused on advancing through a pre-feasibility study, which is targeted for the end of the year. Updating the PEA at this point would produce what we think is a fairly obvious economic result without meaningfully advancing the project development conclusions. So a PFS is a better use of our time to ensure that we're prepared to meet the accelerated timelines that are opened up to high quality mining projects in BC.
You mentioned the inclusion within the BC Critical Minerals Office. I believe that this happened this year. That is supposed to give you I guess the way that you phrased it, hurry up, or supposed to give you accelerated in terms of what the timelines are. But do you have any more detail in terms of what's going to be changed procedurally? And also, do you have a realistic best case timeline for the environmental assessment, or is that just too far ahead?
Yeah, so we currently are targeting the timeline that was mentioned in the PEA, which is something like a 3 to 5 year timeline for the EA. As of today, our goal is to run as fast as possible through the existing process, working with the government and with First Nations to shorten the legislated windows as much as possible. And what being part of the Critical Minerals Office means is that the government is committed to applying additional bureaucratic resources to help the machinery move faster and be better integrated. And so the opportunity there is take the existing process and run it as quickly as possible. And there's numerous examples in BC where that's been successful, both in the environmental assessment and in the permitting process, with a half dozen projects being approved in the last 12 months. Our current estimate is that if we move as quickly as possible through the existing process, that we would be in a position for a construction decision potentially by 2030. The opportunity beyond that is that Bill 15, which is the Infrastructure Act, provided for an accelerated process, which is still under development. The government has stated that they're targeting a 20-month timeline for that process, which is a significant acceleration over the existing EA process. Whether we use that tool or whether we just continue to move down the existing EA process is going to depend a little bit on how quickly the government gets that worked out. And also, there's clearly some risk with going down a new legislated pathway in terms of how that process works, and the legislation is untested. So we're continuing to evaluate whether we just do the existing process as quickly as possible or potentially switch tracks, take the work we've already done, and then use that to go down the accelerated pathway. One of the key criteria to go down that accelerated pathway is clear support from impacted First Nations, and that's where we've been focused for the last 5 years.
Talk about that focus with the First Nations. I believe that their consent is required for the environmental assessment.
Yeah, so in BC, building support and obtaining consent is integral in the BC EA process, and we're committed to working closely with First Nations and really all impacted communities to ensure that we've incorporated local perspectives in project development. It's crucial that these perspectives inform not just what happens in development and in operation, but post-closure, that the way we leave the site is in a way that the community is going to be able to maximize the use of the area and minimize negative impacts. And the other goal that we've set internally is that for us, as much of the benefit of this operation as possible should land on the North Isle. So whether that's developing local businesses to be suppliers on logistics, on port work, on construction, on road building, whatever the mechanism, our job is to try to maximize the amount of that work that lands on the North Island so that the local people maximize their benefit from this impactful project.
Let's talk about CapEx, Nicholas. So you had the PA that came in, and I believe the first phase was 1.1 billion. And you've been able to sit with the project then as you're kind of getting towards your PFS, which is supposed to be later this year. So you've done the geotechnical work. We were talking about the infilling that you're doing. There's also the BC Hydro interconnection process. I assume that you're also looking at the tailings as well too. What are you going to be at roughly the same capex as you estimated in the PA, or do you see some changes?
Yeah, I think it's the context of the PEA is likely to be quite a bit different from the context of the PFS. Mm-hmm. We're adding a deposit, which will change some of the mine planning and sequencing. We're in a very different metal price environment, which will change the grade cutoffs, which will likely change the size of some of the pits and potentially some infrastructure locations. So to say precisely whether we'll be flat or up or down is pretty difficult to do at this point. With that said, usually as you sharpen your pencil, the risk is to an increase rather than a decrease. Our job really here is to maximize the value and the return potential of the project. The engineering that was done in the PEA, given that context, we're still comfortable with. It's still a good estimate of where the project sat at that time. During the PFS, there's a number of significant changes in the project that we're focused on that we think will add material value. So I mentioned the addition of the West Goodspeed deposit, which changes pit sequencing and infrastructure development, metal prices increasing, changing the cutoff grades, increasing the resource size, but potentially lowering the marginal grade. We're investigating alternatives for boosting gold recovery, especially, but also copper recovery. And we're looking at leaching or pyrite concentrate recovery as alternatives for that. And the company's financial situation has improved materially with over $150 million raised over the last 12 months. So that changes how we think about the risks and trade-offs of the project in terms of the capital versus operating cost, and also the trade-offs around port options, power options, and the many viable development opportunities that we have.
Have you looked at tailings? Because I believe that was going to be a significant expense. That was at least according to the PA in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that phase 1 and phase 2 in the project also have very different grade profiles. Phase 1 is the higher grade Northwest Expo and Red Dog deposit in the PEA. We'll add West Goodspeed to that. We're not sure yet how much of West Goodspeed will go into phase 1 versus phase 2 or what the sequencing might change. The tailings is an important area of study, and selecting a tailing site isn't just an economic choice. It's a trade-off of economic factors, environmental impacts, community impacts, long-term stability and risk management. And so that process is underway right now. We just went through a multiple accounts analysis internally on our assessment of the tailings options. But around the operating costs or the sustaining capital for the tailing sites, I think that's driven more, if you're looking at it on a per pound of copper basis, that's driven more by the grade profile. Phase 2 is definitely lower grade. So even though it's a larger and the unit cost per ton of material is substantially lower, it ends up looking a little bit higher cost over the life of mine because of the lower grade. So that's another area where we're focusing on with exploration, with tweaks to the mine sequencing.
There's been a lot of cost inflation in the mining sector. Don't need to tell you. I mean, we've seen the increase in fuel prices. and also labor is getting hard. Talking to people earlier today that they're just having a hard time even being able to book drillers right now for what they're doing. Is there anything that you're kind of keeping an eye on right now in terms of inflation for these projects?
I think it's going to be a dynamic environment for the foreseeable future. Our job is to get our best estimate of what the cost will be, make appropriate trade-offs when we arrive on a project design, and then go from there. I don't know that there's a lot of value in me spending a lot of time trying to forecast oil prices. It's something that's really exogenous to us as a mining company. So understand.
Never stopped a lot of people there, Nicholas. It's never stopped a lot of people. So.
Yeah, I'm smart about certain things, and one of them is knowing where my time is best spent. And ultimately, our job is to understand the context and plan around it. But prognosticating on oil prices, I'm not sure is a great use of my time. So, you're right. Those inflationary elements are important to incorporate and leave room in for the mine planning. One of the opportunities for us, because we're connected or anticipate being connected to the BC grid, is to minimize the use of fuel-based shipping options. And so the more we can base our cost structure on electricity, the less variability in our cost structure there's likely to be, driven by things outside of our control. And then it's just down to, do we do good mine planning? Do we plan the routes for the trucks well to minimize the haul costs and those sorts of things? So certainly lots of opportunities to take risk out there but that's, again, as we talked about earlier, that's a capital trade-off where it takes more upfront investment to build electrical infrastructure. And your trade-off is that you potentially get a more stable and ideally lower operating cost down the road.
You raised considerable cash, as you mentioned, over 100 million, and you're busy with the reports right now, but I'm just wondering about the size of that raise and, what you see it, how far you see it taking you through in terms of as you march the company forward.
Yeah, thanks. We certainly have had some success raising funds over the last while. We had raised 155 million since August of 2025. That gets us, we believe, certainly through the pre-feasibility study, which we had funded from our August financing. Our goal there was to have the pre-feas done by the end of 2026 for cost in the range of about $35 million. We're now working on taking some of those activities from 2027 and beyond and trying to accelerate as much of that as possible, with the intent that the minute we're done the pre-feasibility study, we're not waiting to then cycle back and go do field work. We're ready right away to start in on the feasibility level study work, which is one of the key areas we can accelerate the schedule that we control. And then that feeds into the environmental assessment process. We get greater certainty around the project sooner, which helps us eliminate options and narrow down the ultimate project that's going to be approved in the environmental assessment.
Wheaton was part of Wheaton Precious Metals. The royalty and streamer was part of your was an investor. You had 35 million from them. I believe that the deal at this time wasn't any type of streaming, but there was a right of first refusal. Gold prices are up significantly. What is your thinking right now in terms of the next stage of that deal with Wheaton, just given what we're doing with metal prices?
Yeah, so I'll just clarify. Wheaton was 5 million of the 40 million that we raised in August.
My apologies.
They continue to be a shareholder and then participated in our March financing for an additional 5 million. So I think given their gains, they're probably about a 20 or $25 million shareholder of NorthIsle. So certainly are invested in what we're doing. It is a right of first refusal. It is not a requirement for us to stream. And like any right of first refusal, we have the ability to go out and find the best deal for ourselves. They just have a right to come in and match that deal at the end of the process. So from our perspective, really the goal for us when we do any financing is not just to bring money in the door, but to bring in partners that we think will help us accelerate or better develop the project. And there's no doubt that Wheaton is one of the darlings of BC in the capital markets with the government. They're a huge contributor to communities around the province. And so from our perspective, they're one of the best partners we could have in that sense where we're not just a potential source of financing, but a true partner invested in developing in BC.
Now, lastly, Nicholas, I mentioned at the start that the copper sector is heavy with mergers and acquisitions. You do have a slide mentioning that in your corporate deck. There was the deals that we saw with Faraday, and then there's also the deals that we saw with Foran. I assume that you're watching those closely. Do you have a framework right now for evaluating a transaction right now, and versus continuing to build independently?
I think what I would say around that is that as a company, we're focused on doing the right things to ensure that the North Island project is built. And that means currently picking the best team, picking the best engineers, picking the best partners, working closely with First Nations to build sincere partnership. Ultimately, if someone comes across the decks and offers us money for the company, that's out of our hands to some extent. But we're not the kind of company that's out there putting up a sign and asking to be bought. The job is to build a great project. And if we get valued well by the public markets for that, that's great. And if we get valued well by the private markets, that'll happen someday. Beyond that, I don't think I could be precise about what the criteria are, other than, what's the true best thing, what's the true best partner, what's the right way to ensure that this project gets built, because we're truly believers in the North Island project and the opportunity that brings for the north of Vancouver Island.
Nicholas, thanks for speaking with Mining Stock Daily.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Great interview, and really appreciate your questions, and looking forward to staying in touch with investors.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.